In the winter of 2022, the price of natural gas in Europe reached levels that no economic model had predicted. Futures contracts on the Dutch TTF hub surged past €300 per megawatt hour. Factories in Germany shut down production lines. Households in Eastern Europe rationed heating. The governments that had spent decades building prosperity on the assumption of cheap, abundant pipeline gas were suddenly confronted with a single devastating truth. The system they had built was fragile, and the fracture had already begun. For years, the warning signs had been visible. Europe imported more than 40% of its natural gas from a single supplier. The pipelines ran through politically unstable corridors. Transit agreements were leveraged as diplomatic weapons. And when the flow stopped, not gradually, but abruptly, the continent discovered that energy security is not an abstract concept. It is the foundation beneath everything else: industry, employment, public order, sovereignty itself. The response was immediate, but insufficient. Emergency LNG terminals were fast-tracked. Floating storage and regasification units were anchored off the coasts of Germany, the Netherlands, and Finland. Strategic reserves were filled at enormous cost. But liquefied natural gas brought its own constraints. It required tanker fleets, specialized port infrastructure, and competitive pricing against Asian buyers who were willing to pay more. Europe could not simply replace pipeline gas with LNG and call the problem solved. The volumes were not there, the infrastructure was not there, the long-term contracts were not there. Something else was needed. Something permanent. Something that could not be switched off by a foreign government or destroyed by a single act of sabotage. And so, in the corridors of Brussels and in the engineering offices of companies most people have never heard of, a plan began to take shape. A plan that would require boring through some of the most geologically hostile terrain on the continent. A plan that would become the most expensive energy tunnel ever attempted.
I'm standing at the southern approach of what engineers here are calling Entry Shaft 4. Behind me, you can see the first sections of precast concrete lining being lowered into position. The noise is constant, Pan. Ventilation fans, hydraulic systems, steel on rock. This is a 24-hour operation, and it has been running without pause for the last 11 months.
The concept behind the tunnel is deceptively simple. Europe needs a protected underground energy corridor that connects a major gas supply source to the heart of the continental grid. One that cannot be intercepted at sea, cannot be bombed from the air without penetrating hundreds of meters of solid rock, and cannot be shut down by any single nation along its route. The corridor would carry not just natural gas, but potentially hydrogen and synthetic fuels in future decades, making it a multi-generational investment in energy independence. The route chosen runs beneath a mountain range that separates southern Europe's coastal LNG reception infrastructure from the landlocked demand centers of Central Europe. The total length of the primary tunnel exceeds 140 kilometers. At its deepest point, the bore passes more than 900 meters beneath the surface. The estimated cost, revised upward 3 times since initial planning, now stands at approximately 22 billion euros. That figure makes it more expensive per kilometer than the Channel Tunnel, more expensive than the Gotthard Base Tunnel, and more expensive than any subsea pipeline currently in operation. The question is obvious. Why not simply build another pipeline on the surface? The answer lies in the geography and in the lessons Europe learned the hard way. Surface pipelines are exposed. They cross national borders at identifiable points. They can be surveilled, targeted, and politically weaponized. The Nord Stream explosions in September 2022 proved that even undersea infrastructure, long assumed to be untouchable, could be destroyed in a matter of hours. A buried mountain corridor, sealed inside reinforced rock with multiple access points controlled by allied nations, offers something no surface route can: strategic resilience.
What's remarkable when you stand inside the access tunnel is how precisely everything is measured. Every 10 meters, there are sensor arrays embedded in the rock walls, monitoring pressure, temperature, micro-seismic activity. Engineers told me that at this depth, even a small miscalculation in rock stress could cause a collapse event that would set the project back by months.
The geology of the corridor is among the most challenging ever encountered in tunnel engineering. The route passes through at least 4 distinct geological formations. Ancient metamorphic rock with high quartz content, unstable sedimentary layers prone to water infiltration, a zone of fractured limestone with unpredictable cavity systems, and a deep band of pressurized shale that releases methane when disturbed. Each of these formations demands a different tunneling approach. In the hardest rock sections, tunnel boring machines, equipped with tungsten carbide disc cutters, advance at a rate of roughly 12 meters per day. In the unstable sedimentary zones, progress slows to as little as 3 meters, as crews must install steel arch supports and inject chemical grout into the surrounding rock before advancing. The fractured limestone presents perhaps the greatest danger. Its water inflows in these sections have reached volumes exceeding 800 liters per minute, flooding work faces and forcing temporary evacuations. Pumping systems capable of handling 3,000 cubic meters of water per hour operate continuously in the deepest sections. 3 tunnel boring machines are currently active on the project, each one over 150 meters long and weighing in excess of 4,000 tons. These machines were custom-built for the geological profile of this specific corridor. Their cutting heads are replaced on a rotating schedule, with each set of disc cutters lasting approximately 1.5 kilometers before requiring a full change-out. A process that takes skilled crews between 3 and 5 days to complete in the confined underground environment.
The logistics alone are staggering. I watched a convoy of 14 heavy transport vehicles arrive at the northern staging area this morning, carrying segmental lining rings. These have to be transported down a 10-kilometer access road that was built specifically for the project, through terrain that receives heavy snowfall 6 months of the year. When I asked one of the site managers what keeps him awake at night, he didn't mention the geology. He said, supply chain.
The supply chain for a project of this scale is itself an engineering challenge. Concrete segments are manufactured at 2 dedicated plants, one on each side of the mountain range, each producing over 120 rings per day. Steel reinforcement comes from mills in 3 different countries. The specialized grouting compounds used to seal the tunnel lining against water pressure are sourced from chemical manufacturers in Northern Europe and shipped by rail to staging depots that did not exist 2 years ago. Electricity consumption at the construction sites rivals that of a small city. The tunnel boring machines alone draw between 5 and 8 megawatts of power each. Ventilation systems, water treatment plants, material transport conveyors, and lighting push total site demand above 40 megawatts. Power that must be delivered reliably to remote mountain locations through dedicated high-voltage lines installed as part of the project's preliminary works. At the current rate of progress, the primary bore is expected to reach completion within 4 years. A parallel service tunnel, a smaller in diameter but essential for maintenance access and emergency evacuation, runs on a slightly delayed schedule. Once the structural shell is complete, the interior fit-out begins. The installation of the pipeline itself, monitoring systems, fire suppression infrastructure, ventilation shafts, and the pressurization equipment necessary to move gas volumes of up to 45 billion cubic meters per year through the corridor. That capacity alone would be enough to replace a significant portion of the gas Europe previously received through its most vulnerable import routes.
From this ridge, you can see the ventilation shaft emerging from the mountainside. It looks almost industrial against the alpine landscape. Local communities here have had mixed reactions. Some welcome the jobs. This project promises to bring prosperity to the valley. Others worry about what a project of this scale means for the water table and the valleys below.
It is a tension that plays out in town council meetings almost every week.
The environmental and social dimensions of the project are significant. Tunnel construction through mountain aquifers carries the risk of permanently altering groundwater flow patterns. Independent hydrological monitoring teams have been deployed along the entire route, tracking water table levels in over 300 observation wells. Where drawdown effects have been detected, compensatory water supply systems have been installed for affected communities. The project's environmental mitigation budget alone exceeds €1 billion, a figure that reflects both the sensitivity of the terrain and the political necessity of maintaining public support across multiple jurisdictions. Financing for the tunnel has come from a combination of European Union infrastructure funds, sovereign-backed bonds, and direct contributions from the national governments whose energy grids will be connected by the corridor. The European Commission designated the project as a strategic priority under its Repower EU framework, unlocking accelerated permitting processes and cross-border regulatory harmonization that would normally take a decade to negotiate. Market reactions have been cautiously optimistic. Energy analysts note that the tunnel's completion would fundamentally restructure gas pricing dynamics in Central Europe, reducing the regional premium that landlocked countries currently pay compared to coastal nations with direct LNG access. Futures traders have already begun pricing in the anticipated supply diversification, with forward contracts in affected markets showing modest but consistent softening. Geopolitically, the implications extend well beyond gas prices. The tunnel represents a physical commitment cast in concrete and bored through 900 meters of rock that Europe's energy architecture will no longer depend on the goodwill of any single external power. It is a statement written in engineering, not in diplomatic communiques.
I spoke with one of the senior project engineers this afternoon. She's been working on large-scale tunnel projects for over 20 years. She told me she has never seen anything with this combination of depth, distance, geological complexity, and political urgency. She called it a once-in-a-generation build. And then she smiled and said she hopes it stays that way.
There is a broader pattern at work here. For decades, Europe treated energy infrastructure as an economic utility, something to be optimized for cost and efficiency. Pipelines were routed through the cheapest corridors. Contracts were signed with the most competitive suppliers. Redundancy was considered wasteful. Strategic depth was sacrificed for short-term savings. The crises of the early 2020s shattered that paradigm. What is being built now is not simply a tunnel. It is the physical embodiment of a strategic doctrine that did not exist 10 years ago. The doctrine holds that critical energy infrastructure must be hardened, diversified, and placed beyond the reach of coercion. It must be built not for the cheapest scenario, but for the worst one. The €22 billion is an extraordinary sum. It is more than many European nations spend on defense in a single year. But the cost of the 2022 energy crisis, measured in emergency subsidies, industrial output lost, inflation imported into every household budget, and geopolitical leverage surrendered, exceeded €700 billion by most credible estimates. Against that figure, the tunnel is not an extravagance, it is an insurance policy. And Europe has learned painfully what happens when you let that policy lapse. Somewhere beneath a mountain range tonight, 3 tunnel-boring machines are turning. Their disc cutters are grinding through metamorphic rock at pressures that would crush a car. Behind them, crews are bolting concrete segments into place, sealing joints, routing sensor cables, and pumping out water that has been trapped in those formations for tens of thousands of years. They work in 12-hour shifts. They will do this for years. When the tunnel is finished, most Europeans will never see it. They will never stand inside it, never hear the hum of gas moving through its pressurized steel lines at velocities engineered to the decimal point. But they will feel its effect in stable energy prices, in factories that stay open through the winter, in the quiet, utterly invisible confidence that comes from knowing the lights will stay on. Not because someone far away has chosen to keep them on, but because the infrastructure beneath their feet was built to make sure of it. That is what 22 billion euros buys. Not a tunnel, a guarantee